My name is Dr. Don Hirschman. I'm an extension plant pathologist with the University of Kentucky, and I'm located at the Research and Education Center in Princeton, Kentucky, which is in the western part of the state. About a year ago, we found a diseased wheat head that looked quite a bit like Fusarium head blight. And Fusarium head blight, of course, has bleached out areas of the head that are very noticeable. And Fusarium head blight or head scab is a very common problem in Kentucky and actually all places where wheat is grown. So just sort of annually depends on how severe it is. Anyway, this sample was collected because the symptom appeared slightly in advance of when we expected to see normal Fusarium head blight symptom development. And the sample was actually collected by our station director, Dr. Lloyd Murdoch, who was conducting a nitrogen study. And when our diagnostician looked at the diseased head, he noticed that there was something sort of unique about it. It didn't have the standard coloration that you normally see associated with Fusarium head blight, and he did some checking and saw that there was a fungus called pyricularia that was associated with this diseased head. And we really had not ever thought in terms of this pyricularia fungus infecting wheat in Kentucky or actually anywhere in this country. And let me digress just a little bit to say there's a disease called wheat blast, and this wheat blast disease was first detected in Brazil in 1985, and since 1985 it's really caused massive devastation of the wheat crop in certain parts of Brazil and Paraguay and Bolivia and other places, but all in South America. And so it's one of the diseases that the government, the United States government, and scientists and many others have feared that this particular disease might spread to other continents and cause pretty significant devastation. So that's kind of where the situation stood. So until we found this potential diseased wheat head in Kentucky, this wheat blast had never been seen outside of South America. And of course, wheat blast is caused by the fungus Pyricularia grigia. So it's was very noteworthy to us. So anyway, at the time there was considerable concern that this particular fungus, and I will say, this is almost comical to say, but we actually found the disease on one head only. And when we came out and looked in the field, did some extensive surveying, we still, after collecting and looking for hours, we couldn't find a single other head. So everything I'm talking about is based on one diseased head, which really threw the system for a loop, so to speak, because who knows what to do with that. But it does indicate if there's one, there's probably more. And so anyway, the concern at the time was that this may have been the fungus may have been imported into the United States, possibly with the seed, because this is, even though seed transmission is relatively low with this fungus, it does occur. And so there was some concern initially that, number one, we just weren't quite sure what we had, but the concern was that it might have been imported from another country, particularly South America. And there is a lot of commerce between South America and the United States. So anyway, at the time we just didn't know. So during the last year, there's been a lot of work. Of course, the season came and we've harvested the crop, and a lot of time had passed, but a lot of work was continuing to be done. And Mark Farman, Dr. Mark Farman, who's a research plant pathologist in the department, in our department located in Lexington, just so happens to be an expert on this fungus and has been working with a similar fungus that causes rice blast all his career. So he's a world-renowned expert on rice blast and also the fungus that can affect wheat and wheat blast. So we're really fortunate that we had this resource in our department. And so Dr. Farman took the isolate that we had collected, that actually he had collected from the sample, and began to do some genetic work. And this is molecular work that's not your standard protocol for diagnostic work. So I want to make this a very important point, because if we had just relied on even PCR technology, we would not have some of the answers that I'm about to tell you. But anyway, he essentially determined that genetically the fungus is quite distinct and different from the fungus that causes wheat blast in South America, and that it actually is more genetically similar to the pyricularia that he had previously collected off of perennial ryegrass that causes a disease on that grassy crop. And I might add that pyricularia is also known to cause gray leaf spot of annual ryegrass, which is a common forage crop in the south and also a common weed. And so there's a good chance that this fungus had been around for quite some time, and that's an important point. Now, in the interim, we had sent a sample to Fort Detrick, which is the foreign weed and disease laboratory in Maryland, and this is a USDA facility where they're able to work with these potentially devastating pathogens in a contained environment. And they had subsequently determined that the fungus that we'd collected actually was as pathogenic or able to cause disease as the isolates they collect from South America. So as far as its ability to cause disease on wheat, yes, it does. But genetically, Mark Farman determined that it's pretty distinct. So the conclusion is that this is not an exotic import, that in fact this fungus has been here for probably a long time, and that over time it gained the ability to sort of develop on wheat as a potential pathogen, but has not really caused obviously any level of damage that we could speak of. So the main thing that I want to indicate is that it is here. The question is, what is here? Well, it's a fungus that probably is now able to develop on wheat to some extent. But what we know about this pyricularia fungus is that it is primarily a disease of humid and wet, more tropical environments. So the chances are very slim, unless the fungus were to change radically, the chances are very slim that it will cause any, even have the potential to cause any damage in Kentucky wheat, or probably just about any place in the country except maybe in the deep south if they find it. And so that's very good news. And I guess the title of my talk at this field day is Wheat Blast, a Disease of the Future. And the reason I say that is that there obviously is a concern and a trend that potentially climate change or global warming or whatever you want to call it, and the reasons it might be happening, and if it's happening, that's a whole other subject which we won't discuss. But the point is that if the temperatures do change over time, like over the next 10, 20, 50 years, whatever, and Kentucky environment becomes more like, say, Mississippi or Louisiana, that there is the potential for this disease to be a disease of the future. And so right now I would say no, it's not a significant concern. The fact that it's probably a domestic and not an exotic pathogen is really important. So USDA APHIS is not interested in this disease anymore because it's pretty likely not to be an exotic import, which is their purview. And so right now the main thing is we're just getting the word out that growers and consultants and others should look for symptoms that appear to be Fusarium head blight and to take a closer look. And I think it's important to get a better idea for how widespread this fungus might be in the United States without putting any fear that we've got this new disease that's going to take over the wheat crop, because I don't believe that's the case. But again, in the future, who knows what will happen, because clearly they don't know where it originated in South America, but they believe that a similar thing happened to where probably was on some grassy weeds and eventually had developed the ability to grow on wheat, infect wheat, and then the results have been pretty catastrophic down there. And so we obviously don't want the same thing to happen. So I just want to encourage you that I think we're in good shape. We don't have much to worry about, maybe in the future, but there are a lot of people right now working on this problem. And in fact, there's a group called the Wheat Blast Recovery Program, which is being run out of Kansas State University, and they're actively looking for resistance to this particular organism. And so my guess is by the time it's an important disease that they'll have made considerable progress in finding the resistance, and that's probably the main way it will be controlled in the future. So that's the gist of my talk, and hopefully it's good news, but it is important news. And the fact that it's an exotic, not an exotic pathogen is really a foundational message, and that it's something that we have probably had here for quite some time, and just really Possibly by divine intervention, we found it on a single head.